Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Thursday, January 30th. This is episode 167. I'm Matt Roy. This is Chuck McGettinik. That is not Don Harris.
Nope.
That is with all the Spurs speculation, we wanted someone who might know the Spurs a little bit more
skinny
intimately. You can find a lot of his content from the Spurs Report on our websites, Fox SA and news4sanantonio.com. This is Dusty Garza. Dusty, what's going on?
Thank you for having me. I feel like I've joined the cool kids club now. I finally got invited to the podcast.
You're the first cool kid on this club.
Yes. I think our swag meter just went up. Thanks for having you here. Yes.
He's already looking better than both of us. We're much more casual than Dusty is today. But Dusty, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk a lot about it.
Thanks for having me, man. There's a lot going on.
De'Aaron Fox, Brandon Ingram, Pop, got a lot of stuff going on here.
Absolutely.
Before we get started, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to both News 4 Fox SA on the YouTube side of things. Download, rate, review the podcast. Helps us out a lot. Monday was the Cowboys podcast because of the Brian Schottenheimer of it all. But now we're going to talk mainly Spurs in this one. Rampant trade speculation with De'Aaron Fox news coming out from Shams Charania.
Pardon me.
One day you're going to stop coughing, I swear. He's been sick for like 3 weeks.
I haven't coughed all day. Gee, I'm sitting next to you. Jeepers creepers. Sorry.
Yeah, it was our fault. Anyway, so Shams Charania dropping the nugget that De'Aaron Fox is now potentially being traded out of Sacramento. That trade talk had stopped since the Mike Brown firing, but now it's picked back up with about a week to go before the trade deadline, actually exactly a week as of today. Brandon Ingram also being talked about as a potential fit for the San Antonio Spurs. And Greg Popovich. What's the latest on Greg Popovich as we are now 4 months away from his original, or almost 3 months exactly, away from his original diagnosis of the mild stroke. So we'll get into all of it. No trivia today to save Chuck from himself. So we will we usually do trivia, but Chuck doesn't like it. So I haven't done it in a while. Let's start exactly with the trade speculation. So De'Aaron Fox is the big domino. He is the star in his prime that could be the piece next to Victor Wembanyama. So Dusty, I'll start with you. What do you make of all the speculation?
I think that even though there is a lot of smoke during this time of year, that there's definitely a fire going on somewhere. There's just too much chatter. There's on both sides. When I talk to guys in Sacramento who are, insiders, media, people who talk to De'Aaron, etc., you get the sense that they are worried that this is, genuinely happening. And then you have other forces at work. Like if you get down to like what happened a couple of days ago when this story broke, there was those guys in Sacramento kind of had a sense that something was going on, and then started kind of talking about it on different outlets, on radio and so forth. And then suddenly this entire new narrative grew. Simultaneously, there was already chatter going on that teams like Chicago were having a fire sale, and that there might be some pieces the Spurs were interested in with Chicago. So then suddenly this new narrative, which sort of came from nowhere, and then Shams kind of dropped his brick into the whole into the whole thing. It started taking on a life of its own. And one of the things that you realize is the NBA, I'm going to say this as nicely as possible because I have a lot of friends in the industry, but the NBA is really controlled a lot by agents. Agents call the shots in a lot of different ways, in player development, obviously in talking and negotiating for their clients with team GMs and brass and so forth. And then they also have this whole other network of media deals, of shoe deals, of, TV commercials and all kinds of stuff. So the tentacles of an agent run really far and wide. And one of the places that the tentacles run to is the media. And so an agent can pick up the phone and or work through back channels through their, assistants or contacts and drop a hint to a media guy. and say, hey, you know what, this is happening, or we're making this happen, or this is a story. I'm going to give you a tidbit, right? And so sometimes I get calls like that. Sometimes I get emails. Sometimes other people do. But there are big hubs of information, like some of the bigger, let's say, social media type sites like Clutch Points, and some of these others. Those guys get a lot of feedback and sometimes pressure to push a story. And it surprised me because this De'Aaron Fox thing was getting a lot of pressure. I'm not going to say from who, but from an entity that was helping to immediately sort of push this narrative that not only was De'Aaron Fox interested in going to San Antonio, which we kind of had already heard, but that this was a definitive thing. And then what happens is the next day, De'Aaron Fox is asked about it, and he confirms, I didn't ask for a trade, but yeah, I have a destination in mind. That destination is San Antonio. And this is really, really weird for us who have covered the team for a long time, Chuck. San Antonio is just not a team that makes midseason trades, right? But when an opportunity to land an all-NBA type player who is Mr. Clutch in the NBA, literally Mr. Clutch, he just got that award last year. You do something. You don't have opportunities like that pop up. We do know that San Antonio had been looking at 2026 in particular. If you look, if you don't believe me, you look at their contracts, the way they're scheduled. That 2026 deadline was, or I'm going to say not a deadline, but that sort of target was a time when you're going to have a bunch of really key free agents hitting the market. And so San Antonio had been thinking about, 2026 is a time when we want to have free money, cap space to go after some of these guys. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about big guys like Luka Doncic. This player has the interest from the Spurs has really not been there. It's been overstated. Trae Young is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Jaren Jackson Jr., who I've heard lots of different people say that would be somebody San Antonio is interested in for multiple reasons. And the other person on that list was De'Aaron Fox. So the problem with that is that less and less free agency is coming to pass. These teams are holding on to their free agents. They're signing them. Even right now, as we record this, we know that Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably going to get a big deal from Memphis to keep him. They don't want to lose him. So as that sort of market is evolving and happening, then you look at this situation where you have an opportunity to grab a guy who's told you he wants to come play with Victor. He is fitting the mold of somebody who would be probably better than a Trae Young. I would argue.
Agreed.
Sure. As far as a fit, mm-hmm. and who is, when you look at his makeup as a person and as a player, he's like perfect. He's straight from central casting, a San Antonio Spur.
Right.
He's a hard-working guy who keeps his head down, who has been very supportive of the Sacramento Kings. The people in Sacramento love this guy because he is like their version of David Robinson.
Right. I don't want to cut you off. Javier, would you mind pulling that super down for me? And rumors is misspelled. I forgot to spell it correctly.
Hey, I tried to warn you guys.
That's what I was trying to let you know.
Dusty is just he's probably not going to talk that much. All right, so he's probably not going to have that much to say. So
no, it was good. I mean, how many nuggets were in that?
One thing I wanted to pick up with you, Chuck, is that one thing that that Dusty said was that the Spurs aren't usually a trade destination. You're not a destination where free agents want to come. Is it because of Wemby? Is it because of anything else that this roster has? Or what is it that has made them so attractive? Because you also have the first pick in the draft in potentially 2 years that wants to come here. You have Cooper Flagg, who has said he's interested in coming here, who's going to be the first pick next year. You have other free agents who have wanted to come to San Antonio and play with Victor Wembanyama. Is it just him, or is it anything else that this organization has?
Well, they've got assets, right, to be able to facilitate something like this. They've got a lot of cap room. If the assumption is that once he gets here, you're going to give him at least close to a max deal is conceivable that they're, and again, I don't know what that looks like from the Spurs perspective. I know that they thought there were two players in the history of their franchise when it came down to having a salary cap and max contracts, that Tim for sure was one of those guys that checked all the boxes. And Kawhi was one of those guys too, although I don't know that they would say that Kawhi was necessarily that guy now, having to look back and say, well, obviously he was not, he was freestyling or looking for the next max contract while he was already working on a max contract.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, it is changed. It's different. I wouldn't pretend to know the dynamic of what the sentiment is around the league. I know that by and large, when Tim Duncan was here, you knew that if you came here, you were going to have a chance to win and win big, probably. So that was for sure a reason why, especially players late in their career wanted to come here and have a chance to maybe be a part of something special. So, I don't know, if I can have a measuring stick to see, like, why would you want to come here? Obviously, if you're thinking that Victor Wembanyama is the cornerstone of your franchise, he's going to need some running mates along the way. And, does the clock match, right? In terms of his age, where he's at in his career with where Victor's going. Do they play the long game? I mean, all these questions I wish I had the answer to. They've got some tough decisions to make, I would think, Dustin.
They have a lot of assets too, though. Like you look at the assets they have. They have 12 first-round picks over the next 7 years. They have 3 pick swaps in 3 other years, including one from the Sacramento Kings in 2031.
Right.
They have 20 second-round picks over the next 7 years. I mean, they've loaded up on assets, and now I think all of us are just waiting. How are they going to use them? You can't keep 12 first-round picks over the next 7 years on your roster. You can't keep 20 second-round picks on your roster.
Why would you?
You're never going to have those players. So how are they going to use their assets? And I think when someone like De'Aaron Fox comes up, you look and you're like, that is who you should use your assets on.
Well, again, you just don't have the type of personalities and players that he encompasses, aside from the basketball stuff. But when you talk about the basketball stuff, I mean, this guy is all NBA.
It's what you want.
It's what you want, right? And yeah, it's really interesting because we talk about assets. Sam Presti, who of course, cut his teeth in San Antonio and has gone on to OKC, and he has amassed probably a bigger treasure trove of these types of assets. Somebody said the other day, I thought it was a very good picture. He's built this ladder of assets, right? And now he's on top of the ladder. How do you get down from that ladder in the best way possible? Because we haven't really ever seen this in the NBA. The Spurs are right next to him, right? So how do you get off the ladder in a way that you don't mess this up? And that's going to be tricky in and of itself. But the one thing that I know that I've told people, rest assured, because people, when they hear about trades and who we may have to give up or what assets and what we have and, so forth, is people start freaking out. The first thing you hear is like, oh, De'Aaron Fox wants to come here. Oh, wow, that'd be great. And then they start thinking and they start seeing from the other side what they would expect. And then they start having second thoughts, right? But I say to people, look, the one thing I know is the Spurs, and as intelligent as they are, and I know some of the people in that department and the software that they have, they've already run every scenario. As much as we are chewing on it, and it's great fodder for us to chew on,
100%.
They've already run every scenario of what possibilities there are and what you'd have to give up and where it would take you and so forth. So I trust that they're doing the right thing. I really do.
Yeah, and
the thing that drives you crazy though is that the Spurs are so tight-lipped. And they will not tell you anything. So you have to go elsewhere to find out kind of what's going on.
And what they've shown us over the last 25 years is they're going to be judicial with their decision making. They're going to make sure every stone has been unturned with that decision making, especially when it comes to making a trade of what would be a high magnitude trade. This isn't like a Rudy Gobert that got overpaid for. This isn't like any of those other trades, or even, this would be on the same level as like a cat trade for Julius Randle in the offseason.
Well, maybe even bigger, because as Sham said really nicely, this is a huge domino.
Right.
It's going to have effects everywhere. It may even affect the Jimmy Butler trade now, because and certainly the Ingram trade now, right? But that's the one thing I wanted to say. When I first heard about this in December, I thought there's no way the Spurs are going to scramble to put this together before the trade deadline. that's not them. And so there is the possibility that this could extend over the summer. And there are lots of reasons why you would want that from both sides, actually. But the chatter that's coming and sort of the agents pressing that this is going to happen calls my attention. It's a weird vibe.
Yeah, I want to get into what would be a trade that makes sense. There's been a lot of speculation about, is Jeremy Sohan going to fit in? Is it going to be Devin Vassell? Is it going to be Stephon Castle? There's been a couple of possibilities floated out there by people like ESPN. One of the trades that ESPN put together was Steph Castle, two-way trade, Steph Castle, Keldon Johnson, Atlanta's pick this year, which is an unprotected first-round pick, Chicago's first this year, which is top 10 protected, and then Atlanta's top 3 protected first in 2027, and San Antonio would get back De'Aaron Fox.
Those are two key pieces right there.
Right.
That 2026 or 2025.
The Atlanta picks are really the crux of all of it.
And those are assets that the Spurs value highly. We've heard that multiple times from different people. So the question is this. You have that 2025 pick, which a week or two ago looked like it was losing value. Like the stock chart was moving in the opposite direction you wanted to see. But now Jalen is out for Atlanta, Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, and the Hawks have lost 6 straight.
And they've lost 6 straight. And that looks like a trend that may continue. So that pick is all of a sudden possibly looking like a lottery pick again, right? The question is, and we know the Spurs value it, right? And people are freaking out about that. Oh, we don't want to include that pick. My question to you, Chuck, is that pick going to give you somebody that's going to turn into
De'Aaron Fox? Right. So you're right. That's the whole thing about, all the hoopla and the excitement of having, the top picks that they had last year. They used one of them and didn't think there was enough value in terms of the return where they were picking with that second pick. So you're right. That's something that, obviously they're the ones splitting the hairs on this and looking ahead to what the draft's going to look like next year, and have done all the math on that too. I just find it fascinating, Dusty, for a lot of reasons, because you're right. It's like, how do you know when is the time to pull the trigger on something like this, right? So I think it's different here in that probably nobody's getting fired. The GM's not going anywhere.
That's very
RC's
different.
not going anywhere. Pop's not going anywhere. At least that's the perception. And so they can play the long game, and they can wait out the agents. They can wait out the guy whose contract is up in a year and a half. And, and to your earlier point about agents planting seeds, we don't know that some of this narrative seeding, for lack of a better term, is trying to enhance Houston to make this deal before the Spurs do, because of the proximity. And surely you want him. You don't want them to have him. And then you have to see this guy kick your butt, for all these years. And then again, the other part of it is, we're acting as though anything that you're giving up isn't potentially going to hurt your ball club too. To say that you don't think that Devin Vassell or whoever gets dealt in all this in order to make the numbers work. And then again, where the Spurs are at, very close to being a play-in team at worst. How many more wins is it going to equate by what you give up and then what you're getting back in a De'Aaron Fox? So would it be better to wait? Because I don't know how you end up making the ultimate decision on something.
In a De'Aaron Fox trade, though, you're not necessarily looking at this season. You're looking at next year and the year after that and the year after that. He's a player who is still in his prime, is still young enough to build around, just like Victor is. So it's not like trading for I think Brandon Ingram would be a little bit different. He's a little bit later in his career as De'Aaron Fox is, and De'Aaron Fox is still, I think De'Aaron Fox could still be ascending.
I think we do too.
In terms of the players to give up, though, I don't know if the Spurs fully know the players that they would want not to be on this roster or to build around yet. I think that they're still going through that evaluation process.
I think that's fair.
I think in terms of like a Devin Vassell, I think he would be the key cog. Him and Steph Castle are going to be the key cogs in any trade that's made. How do they feel about those two players is still the answer that I don't know if we have the full answer to yet. That's the question.
We have a fuller answer
about Devin
when we talk about Stephon, interestingly, because this was even asked last night before the Spurs played the Clippers, and Mitch Johnson sort of showed his cards. The question was, you've now let Stephon into the starting lineup. That was a question a week ago, right?
Mhm.
Is he going to be? And
When
he
Jeremy
says-
comes back.
Right, when Jeremy comes back. And now it's like, no, we want, and he said literally, we want to continue to develop this young man. He has taken on the tough assignments we've given him. He's a dynamic player. You don't talk like that if you know that you're going to get rid of somebody, right? So I think that that's definitely, something There's also sort of a core of players that I have heard people say. He didn't say it to me directly, but other people have said that RC said these are the core players that we're going to move forward with, right? Among those core players is Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Trey Jones. So
All
and
players
now,
who are being speculated currently.
yeah, and then the fifth one, of
Mhm.
course, is now Stephon Castle
and Victor, obviously. Yeah.
and Victor, obviously. But those are the sort of the core players that the franchise saw as moving forward. Now, the thing that the Spurs have, which is nice, is the ability to make a big trade like this in this environment without necessarily having to give up most of those pieces.
Yeah.
Because they have those assets that we were talking about, and you have third teams that would be willing, who are hungry for those types of assets, that would be willing to absorb or maybe even send some of their players for those assets. So you look at Sacramento and you say, oh, who was Sacramento chasing? Well, Sacramento, we know, was chasing Cam Johnson. As a matter of fact, the players in Sacramento were apparently told last week that the Cam Johnson trade was happening, that it was a done deal, and then it didn't happen. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like the back of the camel broke, and we got this news from De'Aaron. So, can you do a deal where our friend Sean Marks up in Brooklyn would take some of those assets and send somebody like Cam to a player that Sacramento was interested in to Sacramento? What becomes tricky is this: Sacramento wants a player that will help them win now, that will help them make a splash in the playoffs, a deep run in the playoffs. They're not, and so does De'Aaron Fox,
Mhm.
right? So you look at Zach LaVine as another one, right? You look at players like that. Could those types of players that are on the market, be sent to Sacramento as part of a trade package? Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be.
If I was to ask you this, and both of you can answer this one, if you had to rank, besides Victor, we'll take Victor out of this because obviously he's not going anywhere. If you had to rank players who are untouchable on this team right now, who is the most untouchable? Give me three players. Who's the most untouchable, and then who's third most untouchable? So, like Steph. I mean, I think the three names are Steph, Devin, and Jeremy.
Wait, and Jeremy? What about Victor?
Besides Victor.
Yeah.
Victor's
besides
untouchable.
Victor. Okay,
Victor's
got it.
untouchable. He's not going anywhere.
Okay.
So I think the three players are Steph, that are being talked about being traded, possibly for De'Aaron Fox, possibly for Brandon Ingram. When you rank those three players, who is the most untouchable? Who is the least untouchable?
Ooh.
I'll let you go first, Dusty, because while I spitball this, for me, Castle's biggest asset right now is rookie contract, right?
Mhm.
You've got this guy, he's locked in, he's not making $50 million a year. Again, that's what blows my mind in all this. To make a move like this, the capital that you have to, and the cap space that you have to allocate in order to bring in a guy that you might know from afar. And, I love the fact that his wife is from San Antonio and played
Yeah.
basketball at Johnson High School.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool and makes a lot of sense.
Texas boy.
Absolutely. And then that on top of it, of course. But how do you, again, you have to make a huge decision that, if you do this, the resources and the cap space, and then all of a sudden, it starts to bind you in the years after what you can do in terms of putting other guys around them. So for sure, Steph Castle for me. And then the rest at this point, I don't think if you're talking about bringing in De'Aaron Fox, I would say everybody else is on the table.
I think that's where I would go too.
Everybody, you willing to trade almost everybody else?
Almost. Wemby and Steph are the two that are off limits.
Okay, so Steph is off limits
For
you.
me.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I can tell you kind of the vibe that I get from Spurs fans, because obviously I'm interacting with them all the time. Spurs fans are insulted that Sacramento media today, even an anchor person in Sacramento got into it a little bit with some of our people saying, well, if you don't want to give us Stephon Castle, then pair him with Wemby. You're not going to get Fox.
I saw a
Did
trade.
you see
I
that?
saw a trade. There was BS on one of their news networks out there that it was Jeremy Vassell and Steph and a first-round pick for De'Aaron Fox, and I was like, "What?
Yeah.
In
what are
what
you
world
thinking?
are you guys?
What are you?
living in?"
Yeah. I mean, who's got leverage here,
Yeah,
right?
like,
Who's got leverage
what?
and time on their side?
Right.
There's a lot of reasons to believe, again, that it benefits us to wait this out. All right, getting back to the original question. Now, from my perspective, what I see Keldon Johnson is valued by this franchise in a lot more ways than fans value him right now. He's a leader on the floor. He's a leader in the locker room. He's part joker and part preacher in the locker room.
He's like
everybody.
a glue guy.
He's like the glue guy, and everybody respects him and laughs with him and loves him. All right. So if you get rid of that, there's going to be an aftershock. But you look at it, the financial aspect of it, you're going to need to include a big contract. Right?
Yeah. So it's him or Zach Collins.
So it's him or Zach Collins. And I would say right now, Zach Collins is probably, a more likely candidate. Stephon Castle is very interesting because this is a guy in Paris, when you look at what happened in Paris, when you looked at all the billboards in Paris and the banners that were hanging from buildings and all over the streets and so forth, there were 3 players on those banners: Victor Wembanyama, Chris Paul, and Stephon Castle. The NBA is in charge of that show. The NBA marketing people and the commissioner's office and everybody who's trying to make a great impression in Europe right now decided this is a guy we want to highlight. We have plans for him. So I think that Stephon Castle has a lot of value, right? And then the question becomes the same as I asked Chuck a little while ago. Will Stephon Castle, if you give him up, will Stephon Castle turn into a De'Aaron Fox?
Right.
Or is he worth getting rid of now and, taking the hit or whatever? That's a tough one, man.
I mean, they view him as the heir apparent to CP3 at the point guard position. He's going to be your long-term point guard.
Yeah. And then again, you're bringing in a point guard. And people kind of are confused by this. But remember, the Spurs are playing positionless. They're building a positionless team. Even now, at the beginning of the season, we were seeing 3 point guards on the floor at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Allen Iverson was a point guard. So,
right.
Let's.
Yeah. So forget the titles of point guard, because now De'Aaron Fox is also a point guard. So you're going to bring him in, and you have CP3, and you have Castle, and you have Trey. Wait a minute, too many point guards. No, if you're playing positionless, defensive-minded basketball, that's what you need. But that brings us to another point. Where's our big man? We need a big man.
Yeah. And I think that's something they acquire in the offseason. They need a big man, they need shooting. Those are 2 things that they're clearly missing in this trade. If they can pull something off like a Duncan Robinson in Miami, that'd be great. But I don't know if they're going to get that this year. Let's get to a couple.
We got a few comments actually
first.
lining up with what Dusty just said. Adrian, putting it up right now, said yes to Fox, but then you also need a 3-pointer, a 3-point shooter, and a big man. Kevin says that they should just stay the course, get the players in the draft, and Wemby needs to develop, and the Spurs actually need a coach. Then lastly, Alfonso just says Miles Turner.
Miles Turner.
Who wouldn't want Miles Turner?
Yeah,
on
who
the
wouldn't
team,
want Miles
right?
Turner on their team?
Right.
A lot of great names.
Another Texas.
Let me ask you
Another
guys this.
Texas boy,
So, a lot of Texas guys. Let me ask you guys this. As the speculation continues over the next week, we are basically 7 days away from the deadline, little less than 7 days, 7 days and minus 2 hours away from the trade deadline. If I was to ask you guys right now, do the Spurs make a deal in the next week before the deadline expires? Not necessarily for Fox, not necessarily for Ingram. Do they make any deals over the next week? What would be your answer?
I would say yes. I would say it would be smart to make some deal.
A smaller deal, or
an important deal.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to do it just for kicks.
What about you, Chuck?
Boy, I'm up in the air because of I'm seeing the chatter too, and I don't know. I'm in the long game camp, and I have been. I mean, are you going to be able to make a move to get to the 10 seed, and then how far does that get you? I think those assets that they have in terms of draft capital are very important. But maybe they make a smaller trade, And I'll be pleasantly surprised if they pull off and really, ring everybody's bell by bringing in somebody like a De'Aaron Fox. I just don't know really. Are they forced to, at this point, make a move to get, like, what's the purpose, right?
Right.
Will it make a difference this year, or do you really, obviously you make a De'Aaron Fox deal, you have more than just this year on the mind. If you can't get something like a De'Aaron or somebody like a De'Aaron Fox in this equation, I've said it all along. I haven't seen anything to really nudge me off of this. Play the long game. Build this team with your own guys. You don't have to deal with, these huge mega conglomerates that are overseeing these players. And I find it interesting. There's not a single Rich Paul client on the Spurs roster.
Actually,
right now,
Keldon
right?
Johnson is.
Is he really?
Yes, he is.
I did not know
Some
that.
people were saying,
Okay,
well,
thank you
it
for
sounds like
correcting me.
Rich Paul wants a client next to Wemby. Well, he's got one right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could do
I
this all.
stand corrected.
We could do this all day. I would err on the side of they don't trade for De'Aaron Fox right now. I think that they really want to evaluate their team for the rest of the season. They might make something small. Maybe a Zach Collins is out of here. Maybe, get some shooting, get another big man, something like that. Because Charles Bassey and Zach Collins very, very clearly are not the answer behind Victor.
Right.
Could see them making a small trade. I don't know if they trade for De'Aaron Fox because I truly think that they want to see what is Devin Vassell to us? What is Jeremy Sohan to us? What are CP3's role next season? Maybe if he comes back, what is Harrison Barnes's role? Maybe they trade a Harrison Barnes for someone. I don't know, but I could see him being that kind of disposable.
Well,
piece.
I mean, yeah, you think if you're a championship level team, I mean, Harrison Barnes has proven that guy's game is going to show
He's
up
pro,
on any
man.
squad.
He's just
Yep.
a pro
At
basketball
any time.
player.
Sacramento would love to have him back right now.
I would imagine so.
He's just a pro basketball player.
yeah.
Yes.
He does the things that you need to do.
Amen. It's been a
And,
pleasure.
and some of the things we don't see him do, for example, he's the first one to show up for practice. He's there when nobody else is there. And I was told this by somebody early on, both CP3 and Harrison Barnes are those types of guys. They're not here for the money.
Right.
They're just pros, and they know how to take care of their body and how to get ready for a season. And you can tell that Chris Paul's a little frustrated, by the way. He's a little frustrated.
Yeah,
That's why he came. He wanted to play ball and he wanted to win.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do we have time for that? I'd love to get Dusty's take on that, on the
Go
mood
for
of the
it.
locker room right now and what's going on. I mean, you're there every day, and they've had some tough losses, and we were talking about this the other day. I mean, there's only 3 teams in the West right now that have losing records in their last 10. They're one of them.
Yep.
Just when we thought it looked like they may have nudged that corner and we're moving forward, it's not been going their way here.
No, it's really weird. And yesterday in particular, the body language was really telling. I mean, these guys are beat up. They're starting to maybe wonder if they can turn this around. And they keep saying the same things, but it's become kind of a script. And even Chris Paul, who's been everywhere and seen it all, he keeps saying, look, man, we got to start stringing some wins together. And I didn't get the chance to. I was going to ask him that question. Chris, how is the mood in the locker room? Because you could just tell that he's frustrated. And that's something to watch. Obviously a guy like him came here because we were at point B. We weren't in rebuild mode. We were moving on to the next level, and he saw an opportunity to start and to teach these guys how to win, and that's not happening. So what's going to happen there, right?
Well, I mean, at least it's happening at a higher rate than it was happening last year. I mean, it's
True.
infinitely measurable, the
True.
impact that these 2 veteran guys have had on the team, right?
Yeah. And the question that we have right now is, what is the purpose for the rest of the season? Is it to try to make the playoffs? Because if you ask the players from day one at media day, I said, wow, I get the sense that it's playoffs or bust for these guys. These guys have been working hard all summer, some more than others, but they are really, really focused on making the playoffs. And now here we are. The reality is, man, we're struggling to even make the play-in in a really tough conference. So you're going to hurt your odds of a lottery pick if you make the playoffs. And is that worth the experience? I don't know.
At this point, it might be. The other side of the trade deadline is players, obviously, lives getting uprooted and all of that weighing on their minds. A couple of the players and Coach Johnson talked about that over the last couple of days. So let's hear from them real quick.
Yeah, and there's stuff out there, right? There's so much reports and social media, and who knows? I'm sure there's a lot of people that hate me too. So it's just trying to do our job and keeping everything just bunkered in-house.
Trade deadline always gets tricky. I know enough GMs, coaches, a lot of them was my teammates and friends, you know what I mean? So things can change, 1 minute they're not trying, then I didn't hurt it all, trust me. So control what you can control, show up, do your job, you know what I mean? And hopefully, people deal with you respectfully. That's all you can hope for.
I think it's just knowing that those kind of talks are always going on. Obviously around trade deadline, more people are talking about it, but it could be September and they could be talking about it. Season ends and people are talking about it. So it's kind of just one of those things that, you kind of get used to, kind of having that in the background and can't really worry about it too much. You just got to look at, the situation that you're in, and, we're all lucky and blessed to just be here. And so we got to continue to work together as a team.
Chuck, I'll start with you. You've seen a lot of trade deadlines in your day. You are pretty old. So,
Jeez,
not lying.
How do players tend to cope with this time of year? Obviously, this happens every season. These questions are asked every season. Every year, there's names that are floated out, and most of the time, they don't actually come to fruition. How do players tend to cope with that as the season goes on?
I think it's an individual thing, right? And I think when you're talking about the general age of the league compared to when I, was first started covering the NBA, I mean, everybody's younger. So, and plus there's more internet, obviously, than there's ever been. So
Yeah.
I don't know how these young guys deal with this. I know if I'm asking myself and it was me, it would be difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
have your name bandied about, everybody treats you like you're, a piece of meat. You're not a human. You're just an object or a shiny toy to somebody. And, and the internet doesn't treat you with a lot of humanity. Let's just put it that way. But it's an individual thing. I mean, I felt like we had to go apologize to Steve Kerr. We announced that he was traded before he even knew it. We went to his house and he couldn't have been nicer. I would have been pissed. It's like, I found out that I'm getting traded, but that's the kind of guy he was. He knew it was a business, and for him, I'm still getting paid, and this is part of it. I mean, is it ideal? No, but that's the way it turned out. And then, everybody learns a lesson from that experience. It's okay. Let's make sure that we keep this information tight so that a player, if he is traded, is at least afforded the opportunity to hear from the organization that's trading for him and the team that's trading him. And maybe they're able to set the table a little better than, hey, Steve, can we come talk to you? I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind. You're getting traded. And I am. Like,
yeah, that's the bad part nowadays.
So,
you hear
yeah, but it's like, no, come on over. I mean, so it's different now. And, I think obviously, me personally, I had a little more equity with Steve Kerr than I have with a lot of these young guys. So, I can't imagine it would be easy, but as a fan, I'm with what you said. All right, it's creating content, and we're talking about it, right? We're talking about a team that's 3-7 in their last 10, that got run off the floor late last night, and yet this is still the stuff that I think all of us find fascinating, right? And sadly, maybe it's an indictment on us, but I don't think so. It is curious to see if we could get this guy, if we could just do this, or
it's part of the fun, right? We all do it. Everybody does it.
Well, and nowadays fans, and especially in San Antonio, they're just itching to win. They want to see this team succeed now because but
also fans in San Antonio have a very out there sort of weird thing where they value their players so much that the rest of the league, for example, in this situation, Sacramento and other teams are looking at San Antonio starting five and they're saying, a lot of those guys are overqualified to be starters. And you look at their record the last couple of years, and how can you argue that? Like, you can't argue against that. Yeah, they probably are not where they should be, right? But we're developing them. We love them. We know them, and we know what we get from them. Other teams are like, right? Yeah, but San Antonio fans are like rabid. Oh, no, we would never include Devin Vassell.
They definitely want their players to be better. They want their players to be the ones that we win with, but I don't think that's actually going to end up.
Well, and what's odd is that on some nights they look unbeatable. They look incredible. The chemistry, everything's working, right?
We sat here a week ago after that first game in Paris and went,
Holy crap.
give them the trophy right now. I mean, they little brothered a
Yes.
really good,
Yes.
hot team and
And-
just destroyed them.
And then you have weird stuff that happens, like we're not
That's
playing
the
our big
Pacers.
guys to get rebounds. Last night we were out rebounded 57 to like 20. And you look at that and you go, every time Wemby goes to the bench, why are we not playing a big guy, or why aren't we not playing a big guy next to him so that he can actually get rebounds? If that's important in basketball. And there's like things that you look at from a basketball, just logical perspective that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And then that brings a whole other question from fans that are going, it's a soft tank, man. Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding? These guys are soft tanking, because that's the only thing that makes sense. Even last night, Mitch was asked, what about this rebounding disparity? And you guys aren't playing like your usual fives, right? What's going on? And he looked at it and he said, well, that's a good question to ask. And you go, wait a minute, what?
Answer it. You're right. Answer it.
So-
I want to get to the Pop thing before we get out of here. We've already gone a little bit over the time that I was aiming for, but we could talk about this all day. So let's get to Trey Jones. Talked about Coach Pop's communication with them yesterday. Let's get to that first, and then have Dusty empty out the notebook for us on Coach Pop.
We definitely feel his presence around here. We know, he's been checking in with guys, talking with the coaches still and everything. And so, I think it's only a matter of time for sure.
Does he also, in addition, you talked about how he wants you guys to play, but also thinking about how he wants you guys to comport yourselves as a person, a citizen.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think, he cares more about that than how we play, for sure. And he just always just wants the best for us in our personal lives, and wants us to be thinking about the right things and just doing the right things on a day-to-day basis around, we're outside the gym. So, yeah, always thinking about those things.
So, Dusty, I don't know if it was you or someone else that I saw, I can't recall,
Okay.
that posted a picture of the Spurs practice facility up at the Rock
Yep.
and said Coach Pop may or may not have been seen at the facility today.
Yeah, in the middle of what I tweeted yesterday was, in the middle of all this sudden trade chatter, there's reports, there's people calling me and telling me that Pop is at the practice facility. And when one person tells you, you go, maybe, but when multiple people are calling you and telling you, you start to pay attention, right?
Mhm.
So I said, all right, take it for what it's worth, but this is what I'm hearing. And we also know that Pop has been more and more active talking to these guys. Chris in Paris let out sort of and said, I don't know if this is public yet, but he calls me after every game.
Mm.
And we know, because Mitch has said it, that they're coaching sort of as a unit, 3-4 guys, including Pop, giving feedback. Mitch said something like, not only does he talk to me, he curses me out at the same time. So that Pop, being the competitor and the brilliant guy that he is, it wants to come back, right? And I have relationships with Pop and with RC for many, many years, and they've trusted me with a lot of things. And you don't want to say anything bad, but the only thing, and it's really not my business what Pop's sort of medical condition is, but you hear all kinds of things, and those are things that are coming from outside people, from other people that are not coming from the organization, because they're playing it close to the vest like they always have. But they're positive things. And then you also hear from doctors who say, look, man, if you've gone through a mild stroke, you don't want to get back into coaching. That's like one of the last things you want, one of the last types of jobs you'd want to have, right? So I wish that Pop, number one, considers all of that, although I know, and even Victor said this, I know what a competitive spirit he is, and that he wants to be there. I've heard from players and others that they don't necessarily think he's going to be back this year. Some of the players have been very, very, they've kept it close to the vest when I've asked them, what did Pop say or whatever, and they're like, no, we're not gonna go
Devin
there.
talked about that the other day.
Yeah, that we're not gonna. Yeah, right. He said that. I've had other players in the locker room who say, I'd love to tell you, but I can't. But you also hear, that this was a serious situation that took place. And we haven't heard this again from the Spurs, but you just, hear things and you run into people. The Spurs keep 4 ambulances right outside the AT&T Center most nights for people who might fall ill, or whatever. Luckily, one of those ambulances was there to react quickly when this incident happened.
Mhm.
Unlike Shams and some of these other, national guys have said, this didn't happen in front of players or whatever. Pop started feeling bad. I understand that he went to his office and called some people and said, I'm not feeling so well. And when they saw him, he wasn't looking very well either. And they were able to get him attention right away, which is critical, and get him to the hospital. Wonderful. That's all wonderful. We hear all kinds of things. I heard one rumor that he might be going to a stem cell clinic in Mexico for non-FDA type treatments for his recovery, which is a smart thing to do. I would be doing the same thing. So, whatever it is, it's his private business, and we should respect that.
Right.
And he's in our prayers, and we miss him.
The biggest thing is that he gets healthy. He just turned 76 this week. Happy birthday, Pop.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Her birthday was on Tuesday, one day after Don's. So happy birthday to Don. Every day is Don Harris's birthday, if you ask him. Does their record or anything to do with them on the court dictate his timeline back? Like if they're out of the playoffs by the middle of March, but he's ready to come back, does he come back?
I think he would, right? I mean, if he was physically I think when he's physically ready, I think he would come back no matter what the timeline is. But that's the big what if in all this, right? Because of all the things that have been said publicly by the organization, the 2 things that they've still never come out and said were given was a timeline and what it is that he needs to do to get back.
Well,
Right.
Pop,
Those are the unanswered questions that never get answered.
we've seen Pop take a back seat before, though, and maybe he does give Mitch Johnson the rest of the season if they're out of it. Let's say they go on a losing streak here in the next month and a half, and he's out of it by March, but he's healthy enough to come back for the last 12 games, and he says, you know what? I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Mitch is going to be a head coach in this league eventually anyway. So let's give Mitch the rest of the season. And I could see Pop doing that.
Well, it may also be a serious enough situation that he is not physically able to come back.
And that's a for sure possibility.
It's a very, very, very big possibility from what I have heard. Okay. There's one thing in the Spurs press release that addressed this situation and the severity of it, because again, everybody's been trying to kind of calm the situation down and say, oh, it's just a mild stroke. The fact that he is in recovery speaks volumes. That sentence when he said he is in recovery tells you that there was some physical thing that happened with that particular incident in his brain. And that's also probably why we haven't seen him, because there's something that's serious. And again, like I really hope that Pop considers that when it comes to his grandchildren and his family and so forth, because we know he lives and loves basketball. But there are some things that are more, and even Pop would say this, there are some things that are bigger than basketball. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
Well, that's all we got for today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. I think that was more than anyone would bargain for. I think that was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Dusty Garza of Spurs Report, thank you so much for joining us today. Chuck, thanks for giving us some time. Appreciate you, as
Glad
always.
to be here. I felt this was a very good learning lesson.
I know you could have just sat. You could have just sat over there. We should have just.
That's right. I was over here to cough in your ear.
That's why I wear these.
yeah.
Anyway, so that's all we got for today on the Sneakers Cleats podcast. Remember, download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We'll be back on Monday when some trades could be made. You never know. I'll be at the game on Saturday. Fun fact: I'm going to the game on Saturday against the Heat, and I'm a Heat fan, so I was hoping to see Jimmy Butler. Now, don't care about seeing Jimmy Butler. I just hope it's over by then.
Yeah.
So I will.
That's good because he probably won't be.
He definitely won't be there. So maybe I'll be traded by then. Who knows? But anyway, we look forward to
good hair though, Jimmy Butler. Good hair, man.
You and hair.
That's a good look. Man. That's a slick look.
We'll see you back here on Monday.